Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again for a virtual edition of our Heritage Wilmot meetings. Welcome also to those viewing online, either live right now or afterwards joining the recording. I'd like to start with a territorial acknowledgement, which I'll share with the group. We have gathered virtually in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we're reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community. Okay, next item was disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Do any members have any pecuniary interest to disclose? Make sure I can see everyone. See none. Thank you. We can move on to the minutes from our last meeting. Any comments, questions, omissions, additions? Seeing none, could I have a motion to approve the minutes? Mark, and second, Jen. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So moving on to business. We had jiggled the agenda around a little bit. So we'll start tonight with the water lot. So we have an update and presentation on proposed renovations. We have Laird Robertson and Philip from Neo Architects. So I think we can. Do we have to bring them to be a panelist?
I'm
taking care of that, Nick.
I was thinking, okay. I was going to say, I think Carol's on it.
Sorry, so I'm bringing in Laird and Phil.
Excellent. So while they're just coming in, so as carryover from our next meeting, so work has been ongoing on new plans for the water lot building and addition, and the architects are here tonight to present about where they're at in the design and to share some of their preliminary concepts. So there's no decision made tonight. They're here just to get some initial feedback from the committee and to share the work they've been doing. So thank you, Laird and Philip, for joining us tonight. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
I think I'll just turn it over to you. I understand you may be sharing your screen, so those permissions should be all set.
Okay, I'd like to just say thank you for having us, and we're excited to be presenting this proposal that our client, Lynn Aguilar, is our client who has purchased the water lot and wishes to restore the water lot back to its former glory, as well as adding on to the building a residence and a commercial establishment. She's hoping and will be living inside the building itself, and then we'll have 3 other apartments available for people to live within that are 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. So the vision for the project was, with all due respect to the historic water lot, was to add on to the rear of the building and preserving the historic environment around the building if you view the water lot from the front. We understand that the lost history of the availability of the vista from the front on Huron to look at the front facade with the whole front facade of the building because of the bank building that was built in front of it. But with that in mind, we still wanted to respect the historic nature of the front facade. We understand that the front and the sides of the exterior of the water lot are designated, as is the cupola. We also understood that the rear, what we call the rear historic addition, was not of historic significance to the point that it needed to be saved. So although it is not saved in our current proposal, we are acknowledging its historic presence by maintaining an element that we're designing into the design that will mark where that structure stood prior to it being removed. And we're also looking at reclaiming the brick that is being removed from that structure and using it both to renovate and replace some damaged bricks in the historic front facade of the building. And then if there are more remaining, we'll put them inside of the building as well. So it's probably best to start with the site plan of the project to just explain the context of where the building is being added on to. So Philip will share the screen. I'm not, Philip, are you muted?
Nick, I'm not able to screen. Okay, now I am. Sorry.
So just for orientation, we always present our plan drawings with a north pointing upward. So when I refer to north and east and west, which I often do, so you're all oriented, we are showing the historic water lot building facing towards Huron, and it's facing north. You can see the small circle in front of the building, which represents the small fountain. So that's kind of a landmark piece in front of the building that sets the orientation of the front porch and the fountain. So there's on the west side, which is left, you'll see a dashed red line that surrounds the building. This red line represents the floodway for the within the river GRCA conservation area. And we are not allowed to put any part of any fixed structure inside, or I should say to the outside of that line or inside the floodway. So that line along the west is the westernmost and southernmost direction that we can add on to the rear of the building. And then to the east, the floodway comes onto the property and then it moves away from the edge of the property and towards Wilmot Street. So there's a subtle little angular plane caused by the floodway that comes into our property. So those two lines that are on the east and west side of the historic Wilmot house dictated where we were allowed to build out the back and to the sides as well, to the east and the west. So clearly you can see from the lines that we were able to build a lot more towards Wilmot and less so to the west. And on to the south, we had to maintain the diagonal line of the floodway. So that set the parameters for what we call the footprint of the building. And within this area, we programmed in the garage, the personal garage for Lynn, the owner of this development, a kitchen restaurant, or it's not kitchen, it's a catering restaurant service that exists currently within the building now. And the owner of that establishment wishes to stay here long-term. So we've accommodated a kitchen and a front of house takeout facility on the ground floor. As well, Lynn was really interested in providing some public washrooms that would be accessible to the parkland to the west of the property. So if there is a festival or an event, a wedding, or anything on these properties, ice rink in the winter. The public will have access to these washrooms that are on the west side on the ground floor. The ground floor of the house itself will remain as an office type facility. I shouldn't say remain. It was, a house, office, restaurant, etc. But it will be converted into an office space on the ground floor. The addition to the additional residential units is to the south, and it is entered on the north facade off of the parking lot, which is further to the north. It's a rather small, petite parking lot, just enough spots for the residents themselves, and guests would be parked on the street. Again, trying to save as much of the historic landscape on the property. So one enters this apartment building, apartment complex through this front door here to the east side of the historic house, and then has access to the second floor. And the second floor has 3 residential units in the addition. And then there's a 4th unit in the attic space of the historic house. And they're all accessed from this elevator and stair lobby off of the ground floor. Lynn's unit has access directly from her garage into an elevator and up into her space. So it's a very carefully crafted positioning of her garage and the personal elevator and the entrance into her home. But a visitor would enter through the same front door as the other visitors and tenants would enter through and come up the elevator, down the hallway and into that space. So that program was a requirement, a desire. In fact, there was a desire to have another unit in the building. And as we designed the addition, that other unit was actually where her unit, where Lynn's unit is on the second floor, was going to be on the roof. And it was going to create a very large 3-story addition. As we developed that design, we realized that that was imposing on the historic water lot, and was also imposing more so on the cupola and being able to see the cupola in context of the sky. So we sort of respectfully spoke to her and convinced her that it was best that the development of this property only be 2 stories tall, with a small room on the roof, which is the 3rd floor. It's a small boardroom, meeting room for herself, and an overlook onto the river from a terrace. And so that was positioned far back and to the east to keep the sight lines away from the historic front facade and the cupola of the building. Managing this scale of addition is difficult because there's a lot of program that we had to fit in, and the footprint definitely had to expand to cover up the entire buildable area of the lot without imposing on the historic water lot. That is what makes the project viable. So there's this careful balance between the economics of the renovation and restoration of the historic water lot and the cost of building the addition, and then the available rents from those spaces to be able to finance the mortgage on the investment. So the size of the addition is pretty much prescribed. So now we're going to show you just some visuals of what this looks like in 3D. And we'll start with the idea that we wanted to present to start with. And this is not necessarily 100% for sure, but Lynn has a desire to clean the brick off of the paint and return it back to its original brick. We have not been able to discover, unless anybody here on this group understands or knows that history, that if at any time this house was natural brick, unpainted. The reason we say that is that when we look at the south facade of the historic original house, the south facade has a mixture of Canadian, Ontario, yellow and orange red brick combined together. in a random smattering of colors to suggest that, in fact, it was always meant to be painted, that they weren't trying to highlight the eyebrow of a window with a yellow brick or a coining on the corners with a yellow and then a red in the middle. So until the paint has been removed from the bricks and the bricks restored, we're not entirely sure whether we will maintain a natural brick finish. But what we're showing you today represents that. And that's because that's the direction that we're wishing to take the project right now. So this is the view of central focal axial view of the front elevation, the north elevation of the water lot. And you can see how the addition is positioned to the east and pushed away from the front facade. So it in no way imposes on the beauty and the symmetry of the front facade. One other thing I will mention as well is that one of the chimneys is no longer there. The twin chimneys on either side of the cupola that are in the original historic photographs, the one to the west has removed. And Lynn has every intention of replacing a chimney on the west that will match the current chimney on the east. And the current chimney on the east is not the original chimney, it's a rebuilt chimney, but it will be mimicked on the west to balance the symmetry of the composition. So if we move a little bit to the east and come towards where the parking lot is, this is where you would start to see where the entrance is to the apartment addition. It's directly straight ahead here on this sidewalk, bringing you to a covered entryway into a lobby that leads you to the elevator and the staircase. And to the left of the doors on the ground floor, you're seeing the front of house for the catering food service that is there, currently on site. And then up above on the second floor, you're seeing one of the apartment units that are on the second floor. That unit extends from the north facade that you're seeing here with the gable all the way to the tower element, which is the entrance into Lynn's stairwell and elevator to her apartment unit. So this is her garage facing Wilmot. And to the right, you're seeing the storefront to the food service. And as we continue to move around the building, we will have a loading area and delivery area for the food service that will be on this facade facing Wilmot and entering through a garage door into the back of house and then directly into the kitchen prep area for the food service. This is, yes, I mean, it's slightly exaggerated in perspective with the model as we spin it around. And then as we get to what I call the southwest facade, which is the angular facade, we're starting to see the apartment units and their windows and balconies that all face out towards the pond, the expanding river at this location with the green space between the building and the river. And there's a beginning of a shift from a more traditional aesthetic to a more contemporary aesthetic as you move around the building. And then as we keep moving around, you can note the office boardroom that is on the roof. That's the third story element. And then these large terraces up on the second level. And then this covered porch, which is what opens up into that public washroom. Not so much public washrooms, but washrooms available for events that will occur on the lawn here to the west, which is all her property. It's just that we can't build anything in it because it's the floodplain. And then here you can see the back of the building. You can see the gable roof in the red. This is the remaking of the historic addition to the back of the original house to the north. And it is being taken down and reconstructed in its similar footprint. And if there is enough reclaimed brick that can be used for this facade, we will be using that brick for this facade that you can see from the green space and from the river. And the rest of the house, as you spin it around, you're seeing everything as the original historic house is, with the bay windows. The windows will be replaced, the roof will be replaced, some of the detailing will be reinstated. Obviously the stripping of the paint, the repairing of the brick, the base stonework, the cupola will be repainted, and some detailing that has fallen off will be replaced on the cupola, along with the king posts at the end of the gables, which we actually haven't modeled in here, but there are the spires at the end of the gables that will be put back onto the front facade. So I think that pretty much explains everything we're intending on doing. And now I'm willing to answer any questions you have.
Just had to unmute myself there. Thanks very much, Laird and Philip, for the overview and for walking us through the plans and then the perspective drawings and renderings too. It's a very good description and layout. So I certainly get a good feel for what is proposed. I think I'll just open it up to members of the committee if they have any questions. Feel free. I'll ask to raise your hands if you're able. Yes, I can see everyone if I scroll around. So we'll just do it that way. Oh, Marg, I see your hand up. Oh, but you're muted.
Thank you very much. It was a very clear explanation of what you have in mind. I have a couple of comments that pertain to the historic house. Even though one chimney is missing and the one that remains is not the original, I wonder if you might consider looking at some early houses or pictures or early plan books that would show the type of chimney that would have been on the house with corbelled brickwork and so on. And I can give you some examples if you need it, and I'm sure that you can find some. That's point one. The other is about the color of the brick. I'm in past years, and it's been a long time that I've been at this, I have looked at a lot of historic houses, and it's not unusual to have red brick with yellow brick trim. There's a good example on the Queensbush Road in Wellesley, and there are other examples of where they had yellow brick as the coins at the corners, and then window trim and underneath the window sills and over top of the windows labels. And they did that quite often. They did have yellow brick with red trim and red brick with yellow trim. It's not unusual. And also the windows. When you say you're going to replace the windows, are the current windows the old windows, like 6 panes over 6? Or have they already been replaced once, or are they the original windows? That's the windows in a historic house make quite a difference. The windows are the eyes of the house. And so I'm a great believer in, if you're going to restore the if the windows are the original and you restore them, then they should be restored as wooden frame windows if that's what they are. If they're not the originals, it would be wonderful to put windows back like the ones that would have been there originally. And those are my comments.
So I'll address each one of those. The windows that are there are, from what we understand, are original windows. The issue is around current code requirements and heating and cooling and thermal and so on. So we will be exploring the options between restoration and replacement. But we understand with funding that there's a different funding structure for restored windows versus replaced windows. And if replaced windows are simulated lights and are, close to representing the 6/6, whatever the historic windows were, there may be like Y level of funding. And then if you just go ahead and put anything in, you're not going to get any funding, nor will you get the approval from Heritage either. But no doubt what is put there will be the same divided lights that were in the original design. To that point, we have many photographs of the original house that we have gathered. One particular great source, of course, which you're all familiar with, would be Marie Voisin, who's a good friend of mine, and she's supplied me with a number of historic photographs of the house. So we know exactly what the original chimneys looked like.
Good.
The challenge is the second chimney to the west does not have a foundation, does not have a structure that goes through the house any longer to support a masonry chimney all the way up to the top of the chimney. So if you can't build it from the basement all the way up, you need to use a type of masonry that is applied to a substructure. And that type of masonry is very thin, and it's difficult to get the same corbelling that the historic chimneys would have had with a full dimensional brick. So long story short is that we fully appreciate the desire to rebuild them according to the original. And if not, we will build them as close to the original as we can. That's the intent. The last point that you made about the brick, I think I might have confused you. What I was suggesting was, although there are many examples of Ontario heritage homes that share yellow brick and red brick in combination, as you have pointed out, whether it be a lintel, a sill, a coining, a decorative detail, this house appears not to use the yellow and red in that manner. This house simply uses them in a random bonding pattern over the entire facade, with no intention of any kind of design or purpose. They're just laid up in a random pattern over the entire facade, which makes for a very odd matrix of yellow and red in the facade. Some might find it attractive, and that will be seen when we strip the paint, but there's concern that if it wasn't done with an artistic intent, it could be very patchy and have large areas of yellow and large areas of red, and then some mixed together and so on, because the intent originally was to paint it. And so it didn't matter if it was a yellow or red brick. And that's the part that we don't know yet.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, how are you planning to clean the paint off the brick? What method would you be using?
That's yet to be determined. As you may or may not know, I was the architect for the Imperial, both the restoration and the addition. And we certainly did the highest quality of paint removal on that project. And that's what we would like to begin with. But again, until we really test some removal with different methods, we won't be able to determine how easily the paint can be removed. So some methods that are quite cost effective may not work to remove the paint. So it would require a more expensive removal method that won't damage the bricks themselves, which we fully appreciate. We can't go in and sandblast the face off and hope that the bricks will last, right? We're fully aware of that.
Okay, yes, definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Laird. I was going to mention that too on the testing of methods. Once you get to that point in the design, I'm sure we'd be interested to see what methods are being tried and how they work out, just so we can know what the best way is for this property, but I think also just general interest too. It's be interesting to see.
Yeah, we did a project here in downtown Kitchener, the old hotel, the American Hotel at King and Queen.
Oh yeah.
They wanted to just paint the building, and to prep it, they power washed it. And when they power washed it, they got 90% of the brick off, or the paint off the brick. It just kind of fell off. And, you know, at that point we were saying, well, why don't you just spend a little more time washing it, and it'll probably just be, you know, a brick building. But their design intent was to go ahead and paint it again. So it was painted white. But it's surprising in some cases how the freeze thaw and the moisture movement through the brick separates the paint from the brick, and it sort of just wants to fall off. but you're also dealing with potential lead, right? In the paint, in the layers in behind, if it was originally painted. So now you're dealing with the removal of lead paint, and that's very different. You don't just blast that off the building.
Definitely. Jenna, see your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah. This project sounds like a lot of care and thought has gone into working to find a new life for this building. And that's really great, because it's a very important part of the vista of our downtown in New Hamburg. I'm interested in the decision to have the addition be such ultra modern architecture. So it's a really significant contrast. Can you maybe explain why that choice was made instead of sort of something more that's more in line, or more, I don't know. I'm not an architect, so that's but I'm interested in what led to the decision for that.
I've been, prior to working and owning NEO, I worked at the CA Benton Architects in Simcoe, Ontario, like 25 years ago, and was involved in a number of different historic restoration jobs and additions to historic buildings. And that debate has been endless about what is the appropriate language of the addition relative to the historic house. And clearly, the general favor is to move away from anything that mimics the historic house, the original historic building, because you would begin to compete with what is old and what is new. So the intent is that in these additions, that it is very clear what is old and what is new, and not just by making a false history, by making different colors of a Victorian sort of architecture that would be juxtaposed against the language of the water lot, which is a very unique sort of Ontario Victorian, but it's like a dressed down Victorian. It's a very interesting style. So that's the first decision, is to not use the same colors, not use the same materials, but then become very sensitive to the massing and the forms and the gestures that the house has. So we picked up on the gable. The proportions of the gable and the slope of the roof are identical in both the old and the new. The idea that there is a cupola within the historic building and we have a small office element on the roof.
Oh, yeah.
The idea of the bay windows that project out the sides of the water lot, and we have bay windows designed into the design on the tower element. But each one of these pieces is actually referencing the architecture of the historic building, but in a very modern way. So it's very clear that this is an addition and that's the historic building. And to be fair, you might say that it looks ultra modern. I think that there is a level of texture in the rendering that might be lacking, because the actuality of the material palette is not as kind of clean and pure as you may think it is, given this rendering. We are talking about using a stone base to the architecture. We're inserting wood elements. We have a soft, charcoal colored window frames. We have the divided lights. We'll have operable windows. We have sort of a classic small town, downtown storefront. We're introducing heavy timber elements to the architecture for post and beam aesthetic. So all of these are recalling a more soft language of architecture than ultra modern. That being said, I appreciate that as we move around towards the back, there's a little more of a simpler language on the rear facade. And again, this is to set up a very interesting dynamic between the orthogonal language of the original home and the orthogonal language of the gables, but everything that is on the rotation that faces the river has its own architectural language. So we're juxtaposing these three architectures together into one harmonious composition. And at some level, there is a opinion about architecture and whether it's attractive or unattractive. And as a firm that has developed many successful award-winning buildings, we feel that upon completion, the appreciation of the architecture and sensitivity to the historic building will be recognized as a very successful project.
Thanks, Laird. Any questions for anyone else? Just gonna kind of scroll through. Al.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. I'm going to go back to what Mark said about the windows, because windows is, I agree with Mark wholeheartedly. The windows in a historic building define the building. And I've seen so many buildings utterly that historic look destroyed by pulling windows out and replacing them with inferior windows. I heard you mentioning about, I think you mentioned about energy efficiency. I'm sitting in my little study area in my house looking out my 150-year-old windows, which are marvelous and which I will never replace. Windows can be restored, they can be reglazed. And I'll cite an expert who maybe you know, Dr. Christopher Cooper, who's the editor-in-chief of Edifice magazine, and he can direct you to peer studies that will show that a properly restored wooden window with a properly fitting wooden storm window is more energy efficient than any new vinyl or fiberglass window that's on the market. So to say energy efficiency is a reason for replacing windows doesn't cut it with me or with the science of these peer-reviewed studies. And also, an existing element is far more environmentally friendly than a replacement element, especially when it comes to windows, because vinyl windows are made from petroleum, and there's a lot of carbon put into the atmosphere to make them. So I would strongly suggest that you look into restoring the windows, retaining the windows, reglazing the windows if they are the original. And if they aren't the original, that you go with a wooden replacement that's identical to what's there. And I wouldn't worry about putting a triple glazed window in because it's not going to be any more energy efficient than what you have.
We absolutely have not suggested triple glaze, and we have not suggested that we would not be starting with the restoration as a starting point. And then I said I fully committed to making sure that what was put in was a replica of that era and divided light style of window. If you are happy with the Imperial and what was done there, then trust that what we will do here will be of the same quality there.
Well, yeah, but I would like to see if the windows are original, if they not be replaced.
Understood. And I think Lynn would as well. I think everybody's intention is to maintain anything that can be saved. That is the initial intent. But somewhere along the way, there's a balance between economics and a project coming back to life to a 95 percentile versus 0, which is it can't save the building, can't afford to do anything. The economics don't make sense. And so nothing happens to the building and it's lost entirely. So we're always working in that spectrum of, wanting to do the absolute perfect and best restoration job possible and balancing that with, an owner's budget.
Understood. But reglazing is probably cheaper than new windows, just to put that out there. And I would direct you to Christopher Cooper and Edifice magazine if you aren't familiar with them, because he has some very, very good, and you'd find it very interesting based on your background and what you said tonight. I want to go to a couple of other points, if I may. We have guidelines for the buildings and additions in the Heritage District Plan. Has that been consulted? And to what extent have you been looking at that information?
Yes, it's been consulted. We understand what the parameters are for the historic restoration addition to a building and are following, as to the best of our abilities, those guidelines.
Okay, and the only reason I bring that up is, and Jen used the term ultra modern, and I don't know if it's ultra modern. It is definitely very more. It's more modern looking, and I know why you're doing that than the existing building. But I always cringe when I hear that, because you don't really know what it looks like till you see the end result. Unfortunately, there is a building in Hayesville, which was the old Christ Anglican Church, which has had a new addition put on, which is, I would call, ultra modern, although I'm not an architect, and it is the ugliest thing I have ever seen, and it completely destroys the historic nature of the building in front of it. Now, that building wasn't a heritage building. I mean, it is a heritage building. It wasn't a designated heritage building. But when additions are put on, you're always cringe, because you see really good things, and then you see things that are the exact opposite. So I'm taking you on faith that you're going to be on the good side and not the bad side, but I still am nervous.
I appreciate that comment of trust.
Okay, I think that's all I've got for now.
Thanks, Al. Anyone else? I don't think I see any hands up. Okay, I just had a couple of quick questions, Laird. I was wondering what the anticipated timing is for, I guess, finalizing designs and starting to move forward with some of the work on the property. Do you know that yet?
That's just a very challenging question to ask, given that our contractors and trades just went on strike. But we're not about to go to tender right now. I can tell you that the project has come to a point, based on this evening's presentation, that we are confident in the ability to move the project from design into design development, and then into working drawings, and then permit. So we are months away from tendering the project. And then when we tender, the pricing comes in, and there may be some value engineering exercises that have to be done. And then the winter starts to approach, and there will be a decision around whether it's better to wait until the spring to start construction. We did talk to Lynn about the idea that she could move ahead with working on the interior renovation of the water lot building proper. Certainly we could demolish the back piece, we could begin some work, we could get different permits, but the financial structure of the project requires that the addition sort of be built before the restoration happens, so that she can have a cash flow from tenants within the building before she starts to finish off the restoration of the historic building. So the sequence demands that we start the addition before we do the restoration. And that will definitely affect the timing of the project.
Right. Okay.
But she's anxious. She wants to start sooner than later. She's looking at us to kind of push it along as fast as we can.
Okay. And I just had a question to clarify, and I think I read it right. Is the main floor of the old water lot building that will be used for office type use?
Correct.
And the second floor that will be used for some of the residential unit space, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. That was all I had for questions. I see Patty and Yvonne, you both have your hands up. Go Patty first. I think you had your hand up first.
Sorry, I was back looking at something else there. Apologize. The roof over the front porch on the what is that? Is that the north side?
Yes.
is that, like, I went, that's what I was doing. I was going back to the old pictures, but it's not very clear. And I can't remember in the building. Is that about what was there?
Yeah, what's missing is a filigree that is on the underside of the arch and one that's on top of the arch. One of those two pieces still remains on the porch, but the other piece is no longer there. So our intention would be to replace the other piece of decorative trim work. But the arch has appeared from the beginning in every photograph we've ever seen. So it is the original porch on the house.
And it comes out that far, does it? It looks to
It
be.
does, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I just couldn't remember how it was, when you're there, and I couldn't see it in the pictures. So thank you. I'd been looking at an application here. And then Zap had said an April 1st start, which we haven't done, and a November end, but that was for the November of 2022. So there's not really a plan to be working on the original house during this summer season.
No.
Thank you. That's all, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Patty.
Yeah, sorry.
Yvonne?
Thank you. Could you show the picture of the view that we would have from the water? Like that's it. Yes. So this is what most people would see. This is most of the foot traffic through the park area, on the promenade, and coming up from the Kirkpatrick parking lot. This is the view that most people would see. When I see the opposite side, I see, the elegant structure that is the original building. The addition has a lighter, airier look to it. It's got like the light coloring with the wood trim. When I look at this, it looks like a cell block. If this is what most people will see, I just don't see how this fits with the other side of the building and why it is such a dark, unwelcoming finish. I consider it actually, it looks really depressing. And I don't, and maybe you can explain to me why this coloration of material would be used when the rest of the building is like a light color with the bigger windows. Can you do that for me?
It's a color, and it's understood that we're speaking on something that is charcoal, that is towards the window frame color. I think that the materiality, the lighting, the subtle detailing of this particular surface has yet to be fully realized within the rendering. So I can take it to heart that there is a concern with the heaviness of it. And certainly,
yeah, it gives a really it like the charcoal gray gives it a really heavy feel, which and I know I'm not an architect. I just, it's my first impression that if I were walking along this pathway, which I do at least every second day, seeing this, I would not find it appealing and attractive addition to the to the general look of the rest of the structure. I just don't see how that and plus knowing how the traffic flow is, this is what most people will see. It's not the Wilmot Street. It's not the original house, unfortunately, because it's in behind the bank. But this is where people walk and meander, and this would actually almost be more the front of the building than the rest.
I agree that every building should be considered to have 4 front facades. There's no such thing really as a rear facade. And the lovely thing about a building of this nature that's sitting within its setting is that it can be seen from the east, west, north, and south. And certainly the north and if we look at the Wilmot Street, which is the east elevation, you're seeing something of this nature. And then as you move around to the other side, looking at it straight on from the west, it's there's the combination of both the historic house itself and the beginnings of the addition. So the composition here is quite different when you look at it this way. And then as you move around, then you are starting to see a frontality to this facade. And it's this combination of the volumes and the sort of setting it against the historic house that we were moving towards a much quieter architecture over here to allow the house to really show and celebrate itself with the chimneys, the cupola, the addition, and just wanted to make this other part of the addition a lot quieter. There's landscaping that is not shown in these renderings that will be a part of the aesthetic here. There's opportunities to really animate this facade far more than what the rendering is showing. And it's asking a lot, or have the imagination of looking at something like this and realizing what it might look like as a finished product. And that's asking a huge amount because this is what's being presented. We've taken these drawings and this rendering software that actually does start to replicate a bit of the quality of materials and reflectivity and shadows to give it some life, but it still doesn't truly represent the life that will be there when the building is completed. So there is an aspect of this that I would continue to say, trust in the portfolio of NEO and what we have produced over the years of beautiful pieces of architecture. And don't doubt that in the end, this will be a beautiful piece. But currently, I appreciate the comment about the heaviness of the facade in color, and certainly will sort of take that to heart. I think most importantly, in understanding that we're here for a meeting around heritage in the house and the respect of the house as its importance in its north facade and east and west. That is the purpose of sort of the presentation, of making sure that what we're doing with the addition is not encroaching and overpowering the historic addition. And clearly a quieter, calmer color scheme is a way to tone down the addition relative to the historic house.
Thank you for taking the time to explain it that way.
Last call questions? Oh, Al.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point. I never thought of it when you mentioned landscaping, and I know that's way down the road, but I'm sure since you've seen the photos that Marie has, you've seen how marvelous the landscaping in the front of this property was. That fountain is something fairly new, but there was a very old fountain. Unfortunately, powers that be 40 or 50 years ago allowed the Royal Bank to be dropped into the front yard and totally ruined the landscaping. But there might be an opportunity to reintroduce that, and a possibility, and I'm sure you've thought of this, would be to talk with the Royal Bank to develop some type of walkway from their parking lot that would lead up to that old entrance and try to recreate some of that landscaping that was in there before, because there was marvelous walkways through there that we used to cut through all the time when we went to school. And there was wrought iron fence around the entire perimeter. You can't put that up anymore because somebody dropped an ugly bank in the front yard. But I mean, there's real opportunities there to enhance that part of it as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the setting of any piece of architecture is really brought to life by the landscape that surrounds it. It's very much a part of the extension of the architecture. And when you're dealing with something that is as formal and symmetrical as this type of facade, it only warrants a very formal and symmetrical garden. And that's, you know, sort of what would come away from the house. And I'm sure that as we develop the site plan to the north, there will be a much more formal garden in the front. And then as we move around to the west and south, it'll probably become a little more natural. But I fully appreciate that we have seen some, yes, amazing photographs of what was once the front lawn of this beautiful home. And it's a travesty that the Royal Bank is there. We should petition to get it removed.
I'm all for that.
That would be a great donation to the project.
Maybe they want to be the office tenant in the main floor of the building. Thanks for that, Laird. I'm going to say last call for questions. Going once, twice, thrice. Okay. I think that's it for us, Laird and Philip. I just want to say thanks so much for coming tonight and presenting and sharing the design. We look forward to seeing how things evolve as the project goes forward. And
I'm sure we'll meet again and present a more fulsome presentation with the final choices of colors, details, materials. It'll be seen again before it's constructed.
Excellent. Well, thanks again.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Just need to organize my screen here for a minute. Okay, so next item on the reshuffled agenda, we had the non-designated register photo update. And I understand, Jen and Yvonne, you've been out taking photos of some of the ones to be redone. And thanks, Jen, for sharing the folder.
Actually, Marg and I were out as well.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
So that's trying to capture all the different properties we wanted to have updated photos for.
Actually, yes, Jen and I went out and she did her super duper camera work. So we got that done. And then Marg and I went out and we did properties that needed to that aren't actually on the list yet. So they we continue working on the non-designated list. So
okay, that's great. And the ones that you were doing that aren't yet on the list, Yvonne, were those the ones along Stivers, or are they different areas?
Mark can okay. Better address that.
Mark.
Thank you. Yes, what we did was we picked up all of the buildings on Snyder's Road East from the Baden boundary to Tressler or to Waldau. And we found a few that we felt would be worthy of inclusion. And also there are two that we would have to get on the property in order to photograph properly. And we want to do that. I forgot to bring my letter of introduction. That was number one. That was my fault. But we're going to go back and do those two houses. And then Snyder's Road East is finished. And then we went to New Hamburg. Instead of, I thought maybe that we would do Baden next because it's much smaller. But Yvonne had an excellent point that there are a number of historic buildings that are not included in the Heritage District that covers the downtown part of New Hamburg. So we drove around and looked at the buildings outside of the district, but in each direction, east, north, south, west. And there are a lot there that we would have to consider adding. So it's quite a big chunk of work, but that's where we're going to get started next.
Well, that sounds great. I'm glad they got that section of Snyder's Road done. So I think that completes all the rural area.
It was really interesting. We got some, there were a couple of really interesting buildings. So yeah, it was good.
The problem with Snyder's Road East, it's very heavily traveled, all kinds of trucks, and the gravel trucks coming out of the gravel pit there, noisy, a little bit difficult to park at the side of the road. We had our hazard lights on. We were very careful. It's not an easy road to do at all, but it's largely finished. So.
Well, that is great. And like you said, there was 2 left to go, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, that is great. In terms of the photos that we were retaking, oh, I see Jen, your hand up. Go ahead.
Actually, I was going to talk about the photos that we were retaking because that's what Yvonne and I had been doing. We've got all of the ones that were on that list except 5 we've taken pictures of. A couple of them we actually had permission to enter the property, so we were able to photograph really well from all sides. And had some interesting conversations with people in New Dundee at the Bethel Missionary Church. Somebody saw us taking pictures and came out and had a great chat. And he invited us in to show us the deacon's bench from the original church, which was, Yvonne, help me, what road was the original site? I don't remember.
You put me on the spot and I don't remember.
Sorry. Okay, well,
it's not fair.
Don't remember. So maybe we could go back and get that at some point, but the location, the original location of the church before it was before they built in New Dundee. I don't know, maybe Marg or Tracy or somebody who's been around and working on this stuff longer might know the answer to that. But any rate, included in the photos is it's a very unassuming bench, but it was really neat to know that was from their original church site. Mm-hmm. And a lot of interesting information from the gentleman that owns the house in Phillipsburg. He was very eager to share all kinds of stories, and I want to follow up with him to see if he'd be interested to actually put in writing some of the things that he's heard from people about the house and his experience with renovating it, because I think that would be interesting to have as part of our records. And a couple places that we haven't photographed, we can't really photograph from the road, so we need to make specific arrangements to enter the premises ahead of time, perhaps.
Sounds good. I was going to ask about that bench too, because I saw it when I was scrolling through your photos. And Jen, you did answer my question I was going to ask. So I was just wondering how the progress was on how many more were left to do on the list. So that's great. Anything else on that? I know we have the non-designated register. We had it on twice, once for just a photo update and once just for more general discussion. So I think maybe we'll just roll the 2 together. So I know if Marg and Yvonne, if you're starting to work on New Hamburg, I wonder, I know that makes sense to be the focus area. I know we talked before about also some of the main streets. Al, you mentioned Waterloo Street as one to look at, and Huron as well. So Marg and Yvonne, I don't know if those stretches of road are in your list of ones to go look at, or if we should.
Well, I think what we need to do is just start with the Heritage District and then just look outward, because there are a number of buildings that are, you know, they're just outside the boundary of the district, right? And so, and we did drive, we were everywhere. And so, you know, along the main arteries, there are certainly some, like that, what was Cranberry House, you know, a number of other ones, Peel Street. So, you know, you've got your main arteries, you've got the regional roads running through. So Peel and then Waterloo, right? And both of those are major arteries, and there are definitely, you know, homes that are just outside that boundary, which I think is a good place to start, and then move outward from there.
Excellent. Sounds good. Anyone else? Anything else on, I guess, the register in general? Tracy?
Just wanted to follow up. The last meeting I said that I have the architectural description that that Marg had provided. It was actually 2011, Marg, and there's like little bits and pieces. So I've asked Taylor to help piece this together. So for the next meeting, I'll invite her to join us, and then she can provide, it'll be a PDF, and it'll have all the architecture that is specific to Wilmot Township. So I figure it'd be nice for all the members to have a copy. So if people do want to try or to understand the architecture of our township, that we can have that in one document. And Marg, if it's okay, I'm going to run it by you first to make sure we have everything correct, and that'd be nice to share. And I can recirculate the letter to the homeowner as well and do it in a package for everybody. That sounds okay.
Yeah, that's just fine.
Good.
That sounds great. Thanks, Tracy. Okay, I think we can move on. I guess going back one notch. I had the Baden Mill, former Livingston Mill, the property just update following the site visit. So a number of us had a chance to go visit the site. I guess it was a week ago, maybe two.
April 28th.
Yeah. Visit the site and take a walk around and take a lot of photos and document it. And I just thought I'd open it up if anyone had any thoughts on things to potentially reuse or repurpose, or materials that we may salvage.
Yeah.
I understand some of the demolition work is starting to get underway.
Oh, yeah.
So we have a bit of an opportunity now to approach the owner if there's anything. Al?
You're muted, Al.
Tech challenges.
Want me to fill in while you're figuring that out there?
Okay, you're good.
All right.
There we go.
Okay. I think anything that could have been salvaged that was of interest should have been before they start, because they can't get in there anymore. So Stuart called me, and I think he got part of the elevator door. But I think that's about all he pulled out. I think we talked about that on the tour, because there's no way to get up there anymore to get any. And I don't know if anybody else, that was one thing that I know I thought Jen and I had mentioned, but I don't know if there was anything else. But, and the demolition has, I don't know if they were back at it today. They had stopped because I think they had some problems. They hadn't done anything on Monday or Tuesday.
There was nothing being done today.
Yeah, I think they had some technical, in fact, all the machinery's moved out except that big, huge machine they've brought in from another company. So they were having difficulties with that. So I don't know when they're going to get started again, because I've been trying to swing by and take photographs.
I could hear it today when I was out walking for a coffee, for sure. Like this afternoon.
Yeah, well, they may have restarted. There was nothing going on yesterday, and nothing had happened since I was there on last Friday either. So.
Okay, thanks, Al, for keeping track of that. And the elevator doors is definitely an interesting piece. It was neat to have the elevator in there. I was surprised to see that. Jen.
Now I can't unmute myself. Yeah, there had been a question from a resident about, or a couple residents, I guess, about what was happening, why they had stopped, and there were two things. They were looking to try and mitigate the dust, and they one of the machines had some kind of a technical glitch, and they were waiting for a part to repair it. So that was why they had to stop there for a bit. So as soon as they get that part, then they'll be back at it. It's really hard for me to have any. The elevator is interesting, but what's the context of the elevator? You know, and when I look at it visually and aesthetically and look at the building, there are a lot of things I find interesting, but I don't know enough, you know, which piece might have historical or heritage connotations. And so, you know, that's where my knowledge is not enough. I don't have enough of that context to determine.
Well, it was interesting walking around there. There were lots of neat equipment and things that looked like they date from early 1900s, just based on, you know, there's electricity running to them and the elevator and the poured concrete and stuff. It's so around that era, but they're interesting. So it was good to be able to document them, but I don't know what we would do with them or having a space to put things. But I certainly appreciated the ability to walk around and take photos and really document the site. Tracy, I see your hand up.
I'm going to echo actually what you just said. Is it's great to walk around, you see all so many interesting things, but then you think, what do you do with it? And yeah, if we had this unlimited space that we could just, you know, put little pieces in, but yeah, that's a tricky thing. Like, is it something that could fit on a trail? Is it something that could be like an outdoor industrial art piece? Like, and that's the tricky thing. So I did see those doors too. I thought those are beautiful, but that's going to be incorporated into something later. But yeah, at least we have the photos. So that's awesome. Thank you. But it's always, what do you do with it?
Yeah, especially when you lose the context of the building in the original setting too.
Exactly. That's why a lot of museums that have like large storage areas get into trouble, and it's like museums that hoard, and it's like it becomes big, and then you start deaccessioning on what doesn't fit your mandate and being clear on that. But I'm glad that the photos are available.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was hoping that we'd find something lying in a corner that said Dominion linseed oil or something on it. Or I bet there's nothing. It's all from, you know, it's all from the Master Feeds era plus, and there really wasn't even anything that said Master Feeds or anything there anymore. It was just a wonderful old silo that was concrete and had an interesting wooden elevator door when you think about it. But the view up top was quite spectacular, and I wasn't quite as brave as Nick and And Janet went to the very, very top of the newer silos, but it was an interesting experience, and I made it up and made it down, which kind of surprised me and a few other people. I told them that I did it. But for some reason, Stuart has been contacting me, so I guess he will continue to call. He knows I wanted to take photos, so he would tell me and say, well, they're not doing anything today, you don't need to go over. So I don't know if he's going to continue doing that or not. But he's been very, very helpful in my mind, very accommodating. And he wants copies of the photos.
Great. Well, I appreciate you keeping in touch with them, Al, and documenting it further. It's good. Jen, see your hand up too.
Well, the photos have been mentioned a lot. I took a very large number of photos, so you won't be disappointed. You will be able to look at lots and lots and lots and lots of photos from many different angles. They're still uploading, and I believe I have still over an hour of upload. So once that's uploaded, I will share the link to the folder.
Excellent. Thanks. Okay. Anything else anyone had on that? All right. I think we can move on to new business then. The only item we had under here was heritage impact assessment and talking about potential terms of reference. So there's been some discussion recently about infill development and things like that, which spurred some further discussion with Development Services and Herald about heritage impact assessments. And some municipalities, they have their own terms of reference on how to conduct a heritage impact assessment and what to include. Other municipalities use the Ontario Heritage Toolkit, which Tracy had sent around earlier. And so I just wanted to have a short discussion on that and get people's thoughts on potential terms of reference, and then hopefully we can make a decision on the path to go down. Is it something that we want to take on as a committee to develop our own terms of reference? Or are we happy to use the province's terms of reference, or something else? So I just thought I would open it up a bit, and then we can discuss. Mark?
Thank you. I read it, what Tracy sent, and thanks very much for sending it, but I am familiar with it. I have a copy of the original Heritage Toolkit right here in my little office, and I've read certainly a great number, well, quite a few heritage impact assessments. And I think it simplifies things for us to use the provincial, the one that the province uses, the one the province recommends. There's no point in us writing up our own terms of reference. It might not really follow the standard. And I know, Nick, that your firm does quite a few heritage impact assessments, and they certainly cover all the bases. So I really believe we should stick with the provincial one.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I just, from our own experience too, a lot of places they don't have their own and just use the Heritage Toolkit, which is good because it's, as you said, it's direction directly from the province. And if we do something ourselves, then it could, it would possibly be out of date if the province updates their guidelines.
Yeah.
And a lot of the municipal ones I have experience looking at, it's very, very similar to the toolkit regardless. So it seems like there'd be a lot of duplication on there. You're right, Mark. We do a lot of them in my my usual job. Anyone else? Anyone super passionate about developing our own or not? Jen?
So I absolutely would, first of all, defer to Marg, as she certainly has far superior knowledge than me on this. And but it's interesting. I keep going back to the presentation we just had about, and for me, as just thinking about the heritage impact of a change like that. And how does an addition that is so substantially different, and I mean, obviously our perceptions of beauty are one thing, but is it, when there's something like that, and I don't want to really just pick on that particular addition, but in general, when we're looking at the impact of an addition or some kind of renovation or change to a heritage building, how is it changing our perception of and the whole feeling of the area that we're in? And like Yvonne said, particularly walking along the river and looking up and seeing something that is, well, maybe not perfectly rendered in the thing that we were viewing. I don't know how much heritage impact assessment can help us to ask for different things if we're looking at something like that. I'm kind of thinking out loud, so it's not as coherent as I really would like to be, but it's just, I'm thinking about these things and how do we make good decisions that are going to stand the test of time. And walking the streets in Europe, you go down a street, for example, in Italy, in Torino, and the buildings are visibly from different eras. And sometimes, there's a facade and everything else of the building is a different era than that one piece of the facade. And I think about how that impacts me as somebody walking down the street and seeing it. And how do we, try to do as good a job, basically, as what they've done in maintaining some of that. Well, they had a lot to start with, I suppose. It's pretty beautiful, but yeah, you can see hundreds of years of different architectural styles all together. And ideally we can find a way to make it work here.
Mm-hmm. Rick, you had your hand up too.
You want me to, is it my turn? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I just have a question, and a comment. I found that the addition was overpowering, very large, perhaps not as sympathetic to the historic house as it might have been. And also, I'm in 100% agreement with Yvonne from the view of the back. It's depressing. It really is. My question is, since the building is in the Heritage District and they're putting on this addition, do they need our recommendation to council, or what do we have to do here do they need our permission to do this type of an addition? I don't really know where we're at exactly.
Once they've finalized the design and when they would apply to the township, then we would provide formal comments as part of the, on behalf of the Heritage Committee.
Oh,
so would be,
okay.
at that time, we would provide formal comments on it. Harold, I didn't know if you had anything to add. Oh, I see your hand too.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I agree with Nick, and it's just that fine line. They don't technically need permission, but they need to work with the Heritage Wilmot Committee, and the Heritage Wilmot Committee would make a recommendation to the chief building official. But You have to take into account the wording of the Heritage Conservation District study as well on new buildings and what they need to achieve. It's not as simple as I don't like how it looks. It's gotta follow the policies, and the policies don't say that it has to be something that you think looks nice from the river. It has a list of design guidelines that they need to achieve. And then as a group, you would make that recommendation to the chief building official. Ideally, those generally, like with the Imperial, there was no concerns raised by Heritage Wilmot, if memory serves correct. And so the permit was issued. It doesn't go to council. The permits are issued by the chief building official. So it's not a council process, but certainly the goal, I guess, to word it that way, is to collaborate between the applicant and the Heritage Wilmot committee on finding something that achieves everybody's goals if possible. Does that explain it somewhat better? That it's not like a demolition permit on a registry item where it's a council decision on a recommendation of Heritage Wilmot, I guess is the way I'm trying to word that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. That helps.
Anything else on heritage impact? Margaret, I see your hand open. Margaret,
Oh,
did you
I
have
should
anything
take
else?
it down. No,
Okay.
I'm done.
Al.
Yeah, sort of going back to what Yvonne said. I'm not sure people realize how much that back has changed. Kirkpatrick Park was an island, and where the parking lot was water, and the entrance to the mill race came up right almost within about 5 feet of the back of the house. So none of that green space existed. That was all filled in when the river was rechanneled and the dikes built in, I think, 1969, 1970. So this perspective that's there now is a fairly recent. You wouldn't have had a view from there because you couldn't walk back there because you'd be walking in water or underwater. And Mrs. Kirkpatrick used to get upset with us when we used to cut through that little piece of property between the back of the house and the water. And when we went on the ice to try and make rinks, she would come out and tell us that it's not safe, don't be on that ice. So that perspective back there has changed a lot. And so has the building from when it was purchased by Gord Marriott and anyway, the people that had the water lot. The addition, I think, Elkier and Marriott, Gord Elkier and Don Marriott. I got them combined wrongly there. They tore off what was there off the Wilmot Street was a carport, and that was the entrance to Dr. Kirkpatrick's office, or no, to his house. Was off the carport because that's where I delivered the Globe and Mail, and that was his private entrance, and that's where they tore that off and put the kitchen for the restaurant there, which they want to now tear off and put the new addition. So there's a lot of different perspectives have changed with the properties from when it was when Dr. Kirkpatrick's hands, when it was pretty much still the same as when Scott built it and Myrner lived in it and Dr. Anderson lived in it. So yeah, I'm not too sure if they're even aware of that. But I agree that back is it looks very institutional. Looks like a jail or something. They're going to have to try to lighten that up or do something.
I'm interested to see what they do with that design.
Yeah.
I guess stay tuned. Barry?
I think I'd have to agree with Marg, and I think we should go with the provincial heritage assessment. Seems pretty in depth, report. And also, I'm sure they do continue updates. So we wouldn't have to do that either.
Yeah. Thanks, Barry. And from the perspective of someone who works on them as well, it's handy to just know you've got the provincial guidelines there and it's consistent all the way across, and it just makes sense. Yvonne?
Unmute. Yeah, I was actually just going to agree with Barry and Marg that if it's not broken, don't fix it. And and if there are updates, they will come from the province. So we know where to look if there are changes or updates, and going to the effort and the time and reinterpreting something that already exists. We should sit down and we should make sure that we understand it, and that we have maybe an ad hoc committee to make sure that we understand how that applies to us as a committee. But reinventing the wheel, I don't think so. So.
Well said, Yvonne. Patty?
Just some of the details on the old house, the original house. So will we have a chance to comment on what is being done there? All we talked about before was the brick repair and the foundation and so on. So the replacement of the windows, the question of painting or not painting, things like that. Does that come before us again, or is this considered done?
No, it will come before us again.
That's what I thought.
They're very much still working on things and sorting things out, and I expect we'll be in touch with them as they continue to work. I know Tracy's been in contact with the owner quite a bit too, so I fully expect it to come back to us, and then when they've got an itemized list of the results of them looking at it and figuring out what they need to do, then we can go from there.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. Tracy, when the castle was resurrected, the paint was taken off, and there was a lot of controversy about that at the time, because it was always painted, I think was the assumption there. Yeah. In this case, I guess I guess we'll hear. I'm just same point, is it not?
Definitely. So the removal of the paint, it is tricky. You have to be careful about it. I know I was providing some guidance and assistance when they're working on the Imperial as well, on what technique and what is commonly used now, and pros and cons and things to avoid. So yeah, definitely I was thinking that too about the paint removal, which personally, when I was looking at it, just seems so weird to look at the water lot, that color. I'm so used to that cream color. It's just, yeah. I had a really hard time wrapping my head around it, but yeah, so that kind of guidance definitely would be able to provide.
And why, I mean, the general, with hazardous materials now, in general, where possible, the recommendation is to encapsulate rather than remove. So is there and certainly with lead paint in an interior, they prefer to leave it there. Do you agree that it should be taken off in this case?
I couldn't comment on that, okay. Patty, but I'm more kind of curious historically too, when you look at Castle Kilbride, on whether that, you're right, it is the controversy on whether it was painted or not, or meant to be left painted. The water lot is, I mean, Castle's 1877, the water lot is it 1854? It's in the 50s, for sure. Earlier, and what would have been appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to look at that aspect too.
Thanks.
On the topic of the HIA terms reference, I think it might be appropriate to conclude if we had a motion to formally accept using the provincial guidance, then Harold, I see you nodding. So I think that would help development services when you're talking to applicants for different projects and things. Okay, Mark,
I would make that motion.
to use the provincial guidelines.
Yes.
And Patty second. All right. And Alfred. All in favor? All right, that's carried. Thanks, everyone. So that takes care of new business. I had last item just correspondence or any roundtable info sharing. If anyone had anything, I did not have anything. Tracy?
Just an update about EJ's. I've been helping the owner there with the renovation on more of the decorating inside on some old photos, a lot of vintage look. And so that's kind of exciting that once that is completed, but definitely echoing more of a heritage feel inside from at least photos and as early the ones I have, and just over the years on how right up to like the 60s and 70s. So it's kind of interesting what he's doing. So once it's complete, I'll share it with everybody, and it's kind of nice to see.
That's great. Thanks, Tracy. Mark?
I quite often drive past the former Blue Moon Hotel in Petersburg, and I know a church owns it, and that's fine. And I'm glad the building's in use. However, it does need some work. The paint is coming off the windowsills, and they still retain the early configuration of the windows. I don't think they're 6/6s. I think they're more panes than that in the upper sash and lower sash. But the upshot is that it needs a paintbrush desperately. So I'm wondering, that's building maintenance. I'm just making the comment, it's a little bit neglected. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Patty?
Very nice to see it used. You know, I'm thinking it's working out for them, which as far as I can tell anyway. And the building is well used. There are people there, you know, many hours. So I had a question, which I've totally forgotten. Anyway, go on. And if I think of it, we'll go back to it.
And Mark, back to your topic with the Blue Moon. Harold, I don't think anything would be covered under property standards for things like that. That's only if we would have the enhanced property standards for heritage properties, if I recall. So unless it's, I think something major, then there's not really anything to do there.
Yeah, not on paint, unless the paint is structural, which on some of these it could be. But
yeah, stick it together.
I don't think it's structural yet. It's not at that point. But
no.
Okay, Jen, and then Patty.
Well, if so, my thing is just when you look at the pictures that I've sent, if there's any different, anything I should change or any, you know, like, hey, you didn't capture enough detail of something, let me know, so I can go back or at least correct going forward.
Okay. Patty?
Yeah, it was about the Part 4 designated house behind WO. And I've made quite a few attempts to contact them and give them some help, but really it hasn't come to anything. So I'll try again, I guess, Tracy. Okay. Yeah.
Your timing is perfect.
Oh dear.
I know I was in a meeting Friday afternoon, and our receptionist had said there was someone upstairs waiting for me, but I was unable. So she took a message, and it was the property owner. So he did pop in, and I was actually going to reach out to you to see if you can reach out to him again.
I will.
To see, that would be appreciated. Thank you so much. But
it's probably been 3 or 4 weeks, but I did try quite a few times and just got no response by email or by phone. So anyway.
So thank you, Patty.
Okay.
Thanks, Patty and Tracy. Alice.
There we go. Just since this is information sharing, I don't know if I'll be in if we're going to be meeting on Zoom or live, but I'm heading north and east in about 3 weeks. So except for the odd trip back home, we'll be out of Wilmot for about 4 months. So just to let you know, I get email, don't have internet, so if there is a Zoom meeting, I might be able to attend it, but I would mean having to hop in the car and drive to a spot where I can tap onto somebody's usually that's the library parking lot in Maynooth. It's a popular spot. So yeah, I might not see too many of you for a while, so just let you know that that will be out of town for about 4 months.
Okay. Thanks, Al. We'll keep you in the loop. Tracy?
Just in response to Al, so another option is you can call in. So it doesn't have to be Zoom. So you're not off the hook that easy.
Al, we don't
Nice
want
try.
you to miss any meetings.
And I also know there's a library you can park outside of and have free Wi-Fi.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what you have to do. So I have to do that for the committee that I chair because I have to run the meeting. But phone, I mean, I know phone is an option, but
Yeah.
I have like 1 bar of service on my cell phone because we're in a dead zone because of the topography around our place. If I could go float in my canoe into the middle of the lake, I might be able to phone in. But
Well, we could always come to you some weekend. Well,
that's
you
true.
know.
If you're in the Bancroft, Barry's Bay area, you know, if you're coming up for the Jamboree in August, you have my email address and my phone, so you can email me or text me.
Excellent.
Keeping in mind that he just told us he has no signal and no Wi-Fi.
Oh yes, we can text him.
So we can call and text and email all we want. He isn't going to get it. Is that what we're hearing?
All right. Any other info sharing? If not, our next meeting will be June 8th, same time and place unless we're advised otherwise. Have a motion to adjourn. Mark, all right. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thanks very much. That was good.
Have a good night, everyone.
Was.
Yeah.